Welcome to First Issues. Small and medium enterprises remain the cornerstone of Botswana's economy. They account for 50% of private sector employment and 15 to 20% of Botswana's gross domestic product, GDP. As engines of economic expansion, the goal is to continually look for opportunities for growth, both locally and internationally, and to access new markets to mitigate the effects of a possible global economic slowdown as evidenced during the global pandemic, rising inflation, and to ensure sustainable and inclusive economic growth. However, one of the main challenges is that approximately 80% of small enterprises in Botswana cease trading within 5 years. Some have argued that this is due to a lack of access to funding, a lack of proper business acumen, and failing to adopt suitable business processes and procedures. While these may be challenges that continually persist, there's still a need to pivot Botswana's economy to being export-led, with this initiative being championed by the private sector, mainly the SMEs. One of the people who believes that to be possible is Ramaphoi, Chief Executive Officer at the Companies and Intellectual Property Authority, SIPA, who shares that with a proper strategy to build a more resilient local SME sector, this industry can literally be made for the world. Ramaphoi, thank you so much for coming on First Issues and affording us your time. Right, we're talking to you today about basically capacitating the SME sector for furthering our endeavors for an export-led economy, right? But let us start here first. What are some of the recurring problems that the SME sector in Botswana keeps bumping into, right, that you have identified as an organization that is mandated with the regulation and registration of businesses and companies?
I like to give examples of the so-called four Asian tigers. And when you look at these countries, particularly the likes of South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and of course others, they have a lot in common. When you compare them with Botswana, their history is more or less the same as our country. And this clearly demonstrates that the fact that they managed to successfully grow into a income status, then Botswana still has a chance to also grow. And what they did very well was the ability to come up with very deliberate and intentional policy interventions that were intended to support the SMEs. And when you look at the biggest challenges that are being faced by the SME in Botswana, I can categorize them into three. Firstly is the issues of capacity building and support. Secondly, financing. And thirdly, market access. I think when it comes to capacity building and support, the biggest challenge that we have is lack of entrepreneurial mindset. And when you look into the history, it's not something that happened by default. When it comes to issues of financing, I think the biggest challenge that we have is not because, or it's not that there's no financing. Financing is available, but the question is it of the right quantum? Does it necessarily meet the needs of those investors? The third thing, which is the biggest problem, is market access. And we see a lot of opportunities that need to be untapped, but maybe the operating environment for this SMEs is not conducive for them to tap into the opportunities that we see. Let's take the structure of the Botswana economy as an example. The economic activity is mainly driven by government expenditure. And this explains why between January and March, we then see a lot of activity because everybody is waiting to see what the budget speech has for them, and most of the strategies will be centered around how the government intends to spend. We need to come up with deliberate and intentional policy interventions that will make it easy for SMEs to set up industries. And this can be done through the industrial clusters where we put in place infrastructure, particularly the shared services, because you'll find that one of the reasons why our SMEs are struggling is high operating cost.
That is quite a loaded thought, and I'd like for us to, break it down. If we're looking at, growing the economy through exports, right? How do you see that happening in an infant SME sector? Right, and realistically, what would that timeline look like? You speak of setting up industries, you speak of, clusters for that to happen and actually having impactful employment opportunities. So realistically, what timeframes are we looking at to have whole industries that are key drivers of our economy through the SME sector?
Drawing lessons from many countries that succeeded in optimizing the potential of SMEs to grow their economies. They were able to do it in 18 to 3 years. Take, for example, I think India, if I remember very well, is one of the countries that came up with a deliberate program. That's why it's intended to empower and provide support to SMEs, more so that it has been established that I think at least 99% of the companies operating in some of those cities in India happen to be the SMEs. So this meant that it was a great opportunity for the government to come up with the deliberate policy actions and programs that will empower SMEs. And some of these programs were able to yield the intended results in about 18 to 24 months, which means that we still have a great opportunity to make things happen. When you take, for example, the so-called 4 agent tigers that I talked about earlier on, South Korea in particular was able to turn things around and even reach the high income status in a period of 3 years. Right now, we have got about, 8-9 years to reach 2036? Yeah, maybe around 10 or so, which means that if you compare this with 3 years, South Korea was able to turn this around, we still have a good advantage.